What if every hashira had gotten their Slayer marks? So, the ones that I could think of that didn't get their Slayer marks, feel free to inform me if I forgot any of them in the comments, were Shinobu, Tengen, and Rengoku. I think that's all the hashira that didn't get them. But then now we gotta think about the fights they were in and see if them having a Slayer mark changes anything about the result. But first off, we gotta keep in mind this is Upper Moon 2 that she's fighting. Sure, it might make it to where she's able to live long enough for Inosuke to show up for assistance, but unless the three of them work together without any of them getting picked off, then it's still going to end the same way. Shinobu would likely still end up dead, and then the other two gotta hold off Doma until the poison kicks in. But the one thing I gotta say is, I honestly think her getting the Slayer mark might make things harder. And it might make Doma take things more seriously, which could result in, one, not only them having to fight him longer, which could lead to them dying because they're fighting longer, but also not being able to get the poison in enough before all of them are too critically injured to continue the fight, and he ends up taking them all down. Meaning, we'd be down 3 characters and still have Upper Moon 2 running around, which could be disastrous if he were to try and jump in other fights or pick off stragglers. Either that or a drawn out draw where he takes everyone down and then not long after then succumbs to the poison. Next, let's talk about Rengoku. Sure, I can see him possibly living because, one, he is not going to be able to 1v1 a full power Akaza. We saw how strong Akaza was in the Infinity Castle. But we saw how close he was to getting exposed to the sun with just regular Rengoku. You throw in the amp that the Demon Slayer mark grants him, and one of two things are going to happen. Either Akaza gets serious earlier and takes Rengoku down and then retreats, or if everything plays out the same, he could likely stall Akaza long enough for the sun to come up, which, worst case scenario, is a draw where both end up dying because of like the whole donut situation, or Rengoku just is really, really injured but lives, and Upper Moon 3 Akaza is taken down. But that's being hopeful. That's being really hopeful. And now, Tengen with a Slayer mark. He is dominating. He would utterly dominate his fight. In all reality, with the Slayer mark, he'd probably be able to do what Morichiro did against Upper Moon 5. He'd likely, if he got his Slayer mark, depending on when it happens, he might even come off without having to retire in the end. Because if it wasn't as close of a fight as it was, because the Slayer mark gives a massive amp, he might either keep his arm, keep his eye, or best case scenario, keep both. And in that situation, the other 3 could take on the likes of Daki, deal with her, keep her out of the equation. Well, Tengen just dominates against Gyutaro. Meaning, we would have another Hashira with a Slayer mark way earlier, like, and another Hashira that would likely even be able to fight in the Infinity Castle. Which, someone like Tengen, his techniques, and just how ferocious of a fighter he is, would definitely be very good assistance. Now, I'm not sure which Upper Moon they'd have him go with or what group he would send him with, but his assistance with any of the groups would be beneficial at the very least. Now, here's an extra question for you guys to answer. What if the other members of Tanjiro's group got Slayer marks? Like, what if Inosuke and Zenitsu got a Slayer mark? They are already strong, but then you give a Slayer mark amp. How much is that changing for their fights?